I mean, this would be a great time to do the the Final Fantasy VII. Let me get my thoughts together about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. All right, let me get my thoughts together. So we've been playing Remake, right? Actually, I don't know if I care to talk about it right now. I keep wish-washing on this. If I want to do an announcement, you know, like, well, you know, here's my real thoughts on Rebirth. You know, we've been playing Remake, and it's really good, but also parts of it aren't really good. And I kind of hope that when the game comes out, when Rebirth comes out, they have more good parts than bad parts. My number one concern with Rebirth is that when I decide whether a game is good, I like to look at the team behind it, and the Rebirth team it's of course the Final Fantasy VII Remake team, which isn't very helpful, because that game, like I said, it has really good points, it has really bad points. The other thing about it is that it's made, the only other game that these guys have made all together were the Final Fantasy 13 trilogy. So Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 13-2, and Final Fantasy 13 Lightning Returns. Specifically, the director of Rebirth this time around, because the first one was lead directed by Nomura, and this one is lead directed by the other guy, which is Naoko Hamaguchi or whatever. The only other major project that this man has directed is Final Fantasy 13 Lightning Returns. And I don't know if anybody remembers Final Fantasy 13 Lightning Returns, but that game single-handedly killed all further installments of... They were gonna keep going with what they called it, like the Fabula Nova Crystallis series. They were gonna keep doing stuff with it. And Lightning Returns sucked so bad. It got so bad reviews and so bad of a commercial success that they canned the entire project. And that's part of the reason also why Lightning Returns did so bad. That was part of the reason why they ended up turning Final Fantasy 15 from Final Fantasy 13 Versus, because it was originally supposed to be part of that series, and then they decided, you know what, just make that Final Fantasy 15. Now, I'm not here to say that people can't change, you know? Like, I'm not here to say that, like, oh, if you made a bad game, then you're permanently bad. I mean, that wasn't me. I wasn't involved in that. I'm not the type of person to say that, like, a person is permanently bad, because, of course, like, Yoshi P came out, I think the same year as Lightning Returns came out with Final Fantasy XIV 1.0, and, of course, Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 was also fucking terrible, but now you see what Final Fantasy XIV is now. It's a great improvement, so it could be better. And of course they have, you know, Final Fantasy VII Remake, there's good parts to that. They have Hamazu doing the music is always, of course, really good. They have Katase as a lead producer. Katase, of course, did Chrono Trigger, 6, 7, all these games. But I just don't know, because I would test the quality, first of all, based on the first installment. And you guys have seen my playthrough of Final Fantasy VII Remake. You know, I'm a big fan of stuff like the Jessie sequence, that whole, like, 24-hour structure of, like, here's a day in the life of Cloud, hanging out with Jessie and the crew, going to her, like, her parents' house, sneaking in, finding the, the avalanche place, trying to figure out why the bomb detonated the way it did, talking with Roche, then going off, parachuting down with Jessie giving you a wink wink nudge nudge about her wanting to date you, and then you finally go to sleep at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and then you wake up and have breakfast with Tifa. It's a really cute sequence, and I love the sort of like 24-hour time frame of like, here's just like a day in the life, right? It's not like a boring A to B sort of story there. That part's really good. Wall Market, of course, is great. Right, Wall Market is really good. I missed the turn, whatever, it's a fucking video game. Wall Market, arguably, and I haven't played too many Yakuza games, of course, but arguably, I would say, for Wall Market being based on Yakuza, I don't think Yakuza has anything in its entire series that's as good as Wall Market. So, they're doing stuff that's, like, better than the stuff, way better than the stuff they're based on. The Wall Market, arguably, is one of the best things I have ever played in the video game, and I can't wait to play it again on stream, because we're getting to that point. right now on the stream. So there's good parts about it, but then also you gotta look at this from the other angle of like, the fucking time ghosts, but you already know how much I hate the time ghosts. I think the time ghosts are stupid. That was a really dumb way to explain. And I know it's like, oh, it's a sequel, right? And I get that it's a sequel, and that's why, you know, there's certain parts, like the last hour and 30 minutes of Remake, when I came out of that, I was like, it was heartbreaking how fucking terrible the last hour and 30 minutes. I was putting that game at like a 9 out of 10, and when I experienced the ending to Remake, don't fucking call me while I'm doing a bit. It's a podcast, lady. Get the fuck off my phone.
Things flow differently out here.
I can't shut her up. I don't know how to shut her up. Anyway, oh, I need a turn here. I need to switch lanes. This is what happens when you decide to record your rant while you're pretending to drive a car. You're doing like a weird LARP thing. Anyway, I don't even remember what I was talking about. Oh yeah, the time goes. So when I first played, it was so bad, I dropped it from like a 9 out of 10 to a 7 out of 10 just on virtue of the ending. Because there's so many problems with that. The whole time ghost shit is super, super weird. The whole thing about them fighting like the Emperor of Time, and they treat it like it's just a normal thing, where in reality, like, Arif's been living in a church her whole life. All the other guys are mercenaries, but they've been fighting things that are obviously ephemeral, or not ephemeral, things that exist within real life, like soldiers and like, you know, monsters that are like lurking in like the subway station or whatever. Now they're fighting the god of time, and they're just treating it like it's just another fucking Shinra soldier or whatever. It doesn't make any fucking sense. Then there's the whole thing with the Sephiroth fight. Now the Sephiroth fight, to be fair, does make sense if you treat it as a sequel. So the Sephiroth fight, if it's a pure remake, the Sephiroth fight makes no sense. Because obviously there's supposed to be a build-up, right, to get to Sephiroth. Like, Sephiroth, you see Sephiroth very, very little over the course of the entirety of the original game. The whole point is that you're building up to this crazy, demonic, insane, almost godlike figure who's gone crazy and is trying to kill everybody in the whole world. You don't just start him off as like a prequel boss fight, right? You don't start him off, he's not a rival character. He is like a god. Alright, you're not supposed to expand. That's why the whole thing about in the original game, Midgar, it's all about, you know, fighting like, what's his name, Hugo? Was the son of the president? It's about fighting him, and like Reno, and like all these little side characters who end up not even being important, right? Shinra is totally unimportant to the actual story. There's some gunshots over there, but I'm just gonna ignore it. Shinra's totally unimportant to like the actual story. Sephiroth ends up being the main boss, but you don't really know that until after you leave Midgar. It's really dumb if it's a remake, but since it is supposed to be a sequel, it sort of makes sense, right? Because it's like you've already, in that case, you've already experienced Sephiroth. You know who Sephiroth is. It still doesn't make sense story-wise why everybody is just so okay with this. Like, they would be asking so many questions. Who is this Sephiroth guy? Why are we in this crazy, like, time-space continuum place in the Chaos Domain? Who is this, like, god time emperor? Who are these time ghosts? What happened? Now that they're dead, what's gonna happen to us? Like, what's going on? All of these questions that occur, that should be occurring to these characters, that don't seem to actually occur to these characters, it's a really big problem. I need to go pick up this DLC item. Well, it's not DLC item. It's the crossover update. Hey, buddy, what's up? All right, where were we on the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth podcast? So yeah, the ending was super dumb. The whole thing with the time ghosts. I mean, I'm glad they're gone, but there's still the fact that they existed in the first place, and the still fact that I thought that whole thing was really stupid. So I guess the quality. Why is this motherfucker calling me? I don't even know who you are. So those are my main concerns going into Rebirth, because the story was handled so poorly when it came to like the time ghosts and Sephiroth and everything, and I question Nojima's ability, because of course Nojima did write Final Fantasy VII, but he also wrote Advent Children, and I think he wrote Crisis Core. I don't think he wrote Dirge of Cerberus, which is why Dirge of Cerberus is so bad. It's also why Dirge of Cerberus is no longer canon. But I question the writing ability there. I don't question the music. The music by Hamazu is of course going to be really good. I mean, that guy's been taking over for Uematsu since like 10, 13, and then Remake. So I trust his ability. I trust the music's going to be good, of course, and we already kind of know the music's good because we've heard it. You know, art style wise, at 13, the reason I bring up art style is because 13 is easily the best looking Final Fantasy game. In fact, it's really the only thing besides the music that you can really go and say, okay, it's a deep incline, man. What do you want me to do? It's the only thing besides the music that you can say is really good about it. My number one concerns are going to be, my number one concern is probably going to be the story, because gameplay-wise, also, I don't think they would fuck up the gameplay that much. I guess the biggest concerns about the gameplay is, does just feel like a big, empty theme park world. Because Final Fantasy is definitely something that's supposed to be immersive. It's not supposed to be a theme park, right? Theme park is for stuff like Xenoblade. And there's no problem, by the way, with making a theme park JRPG. In fact, a lot of times I enjoy the theme park games a lot more. It's just that Final Fantasy is about immersion. Final Fantasy 15, its strongest trait, which by the way, we're going to be playing that eventually at some point. But Final Fantasy 15 is easily the most immersive experience, and it's easily the best part about Final Fantasy 15 is that it's the most immersive of all of the Final Fantasy games. So if we get a really immersive Rebirth, I think that could really showcase, and it seems like they're trying to focus a lot more on doing stuff like being more immersive for Rebirth. I mean, like, if you think about the immersion factor in Remake, you know, that whole Jesse sequence, Wall Market, those are immersive scenes. So if they really focus, I should not have run over that trash can. If they really focus, you know, in that game on immersion, that could be a good quality, that could help boost the story a little bit. But I think the main focus is that, like, I mean, they are going to change the story. Duh. Zack's alive in a split timeline because the Time Ghost got killed, which is still really dumb. I don't think Zack being alive in an alternate timeline is necessarily a bad thing, at least as long as they could write that properly. Which, once again, I got concerns about. Anytime it comes to quote-unquote writing properly, I have concerns about Final Fantasy. In general, not even about 7. About Final Fantasy in general. Whether it be 14, whether it be, you know, what have you. I'm always going to be concerned about the writing, because the story in Final Fantasy has not been good. It's been very shaky for, like, a decade now. So, I just don't know, man. The story is really my concern, and it's the main story, too. But I hope it's a good, immersive experience, at least. I hope the minigames are good. They said they were putting a lot of focus on the minigames, which is, of course, something that is rather concerning to me as a game that is supposed to be, you know... I mean, the original had a lot of minigames, but none of them were very good. That's my concern. The minigames were always like, you know, you're telling me you're putting so much focus on what was the worst part of the original game. Does that not concern you a little bit? I don't know. Or maybe if you treat it more like it's a thing that's supposed to be like, we're trying to make an improvement on that. Something just like exploded. I don't know what happened. So for Rebirth, the things that I'm going to be looking at when that game comes out is mostly main story stuff. And I hope it's good, because they really need like a banger, right? That's the problem. When you're making Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, so, I'm going to speak in Metacritic scores, and I know people really don't like it when you talk about Metacritic scores. And I don't treat Metacritic scores as the end-all, be-all, but it's a really good early number to see whether something's going to be good, right? So if we're talking about, you know, what the standard, the expectation that Rebirth needs to set. So, you know, for example, I want to say Remake got an 88 on Metacritic, which is way lower, I think, than what a lot of people were expecting. Now, of course, you know, now that that game has come out, and now that the, you know, opinion has sort of, the dust has settled, per se, the proverbial dust has settled, you could say that, you know, I think most people enjoyed it. GameSpot gave it a 10, so it did have that at least going for it. I mean, at this point, we can talk about users, right? I think in terms of fans, it was pretty divisive. Of course, you already know my opinion. You know, I like to look at like influencers and creators, mostly because I don't have any friends who like Final Fantasy. Max is of course a very, very big proponent of the Final Fantasy VII Remake series, and he's a very hard shill for Rebirth. I think of people like Viddy, Vinesauce did not like that game as much, at least from what I heard. I think he still plans on playing Rebirth, but he was not a big fan of Remake, and he's also concerned with Rebirth, so I'd put myself in the same camp. I do think that definitively Remake had some great scenes, and those scenes need to be like way more upped in order for it, because if we're talking expectations, you know, Rebirth, I'm going to say once again, I'm talking Metacritic scores, but proverbially, the hypothetical, figurative Metacritic score rating of 95 for Rebirth, because if you're looking at, I mean, the original got 97. Just as it's an example. I'm using it as a what do you call it? An analogy for the user rating, because the user rating is actually what matters. The reason the people who actually play the game, their opinion of it is actually what matters, not the critics. But I'm using that because it's good shorthand. Usually, when a Metacritic score is high, the user reviews also tend to be high, unless it got like paid for or something. And also, the game hasn't come out yet. The next thing that we'll see about it is going to be the critic reviews about a weekend. So it's got to aim very, very high because, like I said, it's a remake of a game that's really good. And if you look at the standards set by, for example, Capcom with the Resident Evil remakes that are all really good, well, I heard people didn't like 3, but for 2 and 4 they were really good, and people liked those. 4 is, of course, considered to be also one of the greatest games of all time, and they hit it. They hit it by playing it pretty straightforwardly, which, of course, Final Fantasy is not doing, but it's a good example of where they need to go from there. So I guess a TLDR on the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth rant. I'm concerned. I've seen all the evidence. I've watched all the trailers. I've watched all the Max explanations and Max talking about the game. Of course, I'm talking about Maximilian, dude, who does a bunch of the... He's the main person who does Final Fantasy VII Rebirth content. I've watched all his videos, and I'm still sitting there and I'm thinking, I don't know if these people know what they're doing. I have no idea. They don't give me 100% confidence that they know what they're doing. And it's based on, a lot of it's based on how kind of shaky Remake was. So they really, because Remake was so shaky, because I felt Remake was so shaky, they need to convince me for this. And we can also talk about all the gameplay and all the features and stuff that we saw, you know, from the footage of, you know, for the trailers, the gameplay demos, the demo that's currently available, all this sort of stuff. It's good, but it's like 8 out of 10 good. But I mean, like, to be fair, I feel like I have a hard time judging it based on, like, trailers and stuff, because there's so little. But I'm also, like, part of me is like, you know, this is content that they are picking themselves, that they're choosing to advertise, and it's just like the calm flashback of the demo, it's okay. I'm gonna make a joke about MLK Boulevard, but I'm not going to. It's okay. Cause of it's the Reddit thing. I'm not racist. Okay, I'm sorry, I had to address that. It's like a big Reddit joke of like, oh, MLK is where all the like crime happens. And this neighborhood actually doesn't look that bad for Night City. So, and they were the ones who put MLK Boulevard on there anyway. They also put Mission, which is another notoriously shitty road. Maybe if I brought up that one, you wouldn't call me racist. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And the content that we've seen so far, I think in terms of content, I think in terms of gameplay, especially with that final trailer, looking at some of the mini games and a lot of the like overall world, because it's like the size of the world, right? If your concern is that the world's going to be too big and too small, this guy wants to call me. Oh, Jesus.
Got a job for you.
If we're talking about the map size, I think it's like I don't know. The map size is like it's pretty decent. It's decently sized. but it's sized enough where like there could be a lot of content there, a lot of stuff you can do, but also not like too big, not too many like empty spaces. It's kind of like the size of this map, right? In total, I think for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it's about the size of all of Night City, which is fair. So that's one way to look at it. All the mini games, they all look new. Of the mini games that were copies of the mini games that were in what do you call it? The original Final Fantasy VII. I don't know why I was like, what do you call that? And of the mini games that are based on the mini games in the original Final Fantasy VII, they look like they improved all of them. So it's all good. It might be good, and we don't know because the game's not out. And at the end of the day, it's your opinion, man. So do whatever you want. All right, that's what's important. Do what makes you happy. And this has been my Final Fantasy VII Rebirth talk, rant. If you like this video, subscribe, and hit that like button, and hit that notification. Do that right now, and I need to kill these guys. So goodbye.